I think it says it's live. There we go. Now it says it's live.
There we
Welcome.
are.
This is a recording for the Thomas Green Power, Office Politics, and a Career in Crisis. So Tina, Jesse, and Cody and myself are here in attendance. The case study, brief overview. Mr. Thomas Green was recently promoted to the Senior Marketing Specialist at Dynamic Displays. His direct boss is Frank Davis, with the vice president of Shannon McDonald. Well, a little bit of overview. Green is making a few choices that are not putting him in coercion with the others. He's not very fond of an annual 2-3 month review process when it's all promotions. That doesn't go over very well. In his job as now in the office as a senior marketing specialist, he struggles with moving away from his previous responsibilities. He does get into a few arguments and a few direct things where he doesn't play the role as a senior marketing analysis, senior marketing specialist, because he kind of has his own way of doing things, own way of looking at sales and forecasting, and he's coming to the point where he's in jeopardy. He's feels that he's being attacked by his boss and being in jeopardy of his job. Is that about as synopsis as it's going to get?
Good one.
Pretty much, I think so.
Yeah, I think it's good.
So he's basically facing a dilemma as a marketing manager. He was rapidly promoted, but then criticized by his boss.
Well, remember too that he was promoted into the spot that his boss was promoted from also.
Okay.
And it doesn't look like there was any interaction with the team during the interview process. It looks like he was just, that Mary Jacobs promoted him with reservations, but didn't include anybody that he was going to report to or work with in that process of adding to the team.
So what do you think this affected the setup mood of the whole situation?
Well, she points out, like, right off when she hires, that Frank Davis would have never hired him for the position. She automatically goes in with knowing that he's not the number one candidate for this job based upon the immediate manager of the position.
Well, it wasn't his choice. So, and they really didn't talk about any of the other candidates that they interviewed for this job either.
So what do you do when you have to work with someone that you had no input on?
I think you have to sit down with them right from the get-go and have a meeting and find out, set the expectations and find out what they, what their goal is. And, if you don't have that goal, if you don't have those expectations and goals set up, you're never going to get to a understanding.
I agree. You got to have some common ground. You got to have a place to start, and you got to know what's expected of you by your manager. It doesn't matter who hired you. Your manager, you need to have a relationship there in order to make it work.
Yeah, and they never established that.
So what do you
And,
do
and
then?
then you get into a meeting. Huh?
So what do you do then when nothing's really ground established?
Well, one of the two people need to facilitate that, or even Mary Jacobs needed to facilitate that when she first hired Thomas to be in that position. She probably should have set up a meeting between him and Frank Davis and set up the expectations, because they were both recent promotions.
How does this differ? And this is a question I have: is from someone basically a calling in the church, where you're basically told this is your position, and then you're told to magnify it. Is this any resemblance, any relation, any comparison?
Oh, yeah, because you have to meet with your team. Because if you don't meet with them, you can come in and have these grandiose ideas and come in and go, well, we're going to do X, Y, Z. And everybody's like, but we're working on this. So you still have to work with people and find out where they're at and what they're able to do, and set the expectations so that you can go forward and magnify.
Okay. What are some other key issues in this case? You got established that he basically put there not as the first choice, that his expectations were unknown, who he reports to is unknown, or is unclear, I should say.
I'd say unclear. Well, I didn't like the way it was like, just go ask somebody who's been in the group longer. There was no clear person or mentor for him to refer to. It was just, I'll just go ask somebody who's been there longer. And that doesn't always get you the best answer or best results either.
No, not really.
Well, I don't think Davis made it any easier on him either. I mean, he didn't.
Mm-mm.
He didn't. First of all, if I remember right, Davis told him straight up that he didn't like the fact that they hired him and he didn't have an opportunity to have any part of it. And he told him straight up that, you know, he didn't think that he was the one for the job. So, I mean, that makes it pretty tough to know that you're already at odds before you even had your, you know, really even a chance to prove yourself.
Before you even start.
Yeah.
I would say that the number one thing that drives me about companies that promote within the company is that very few of them actually train the people in their new position. Like, okay, now you're a manager, manage. My wife, she worked for St. Luke's as like a person that fixes glasses. Oh, sorry, St. Luke's is a hospital. She worked for a hospital as someone that fitted glasses, and then she got promoted to a manager. She's never ever had a managing position or training before, and they never trained her. So she had no idea what to do and just made things up as she went along, and eventually quit because she hated the job. And it's like, why didn't anyone train Davis on his job? Why didn't anyone train Thomas on his job? And then have those two come together as a team, or I wonder how Davis's interaction is with the other team members. Like, it doesn't make sense. Like, why that happened.
I think you're right, because, you know, you just don't one day step in and go, oh, you do this job really great, and so we're going to promote you. Because I think we've all been in a place where the person that was doing the best job at whatever position it was, and then promoted to management, and they weren't the best manager. They would have been happier if they had stayed in their original position, because that's where, you know, they wanted to be. But they thought if they didn't take the promotion, they'd be out of a job, or the promotion sounded great, but they didn't realize the responsibility.
Yeah. Hey, Cody, your question for you. When, in your opinion, what are some biggest reasons why a company promotes from within?
Well, I mean, it makes sense to promote within, because then that person's already there. They already have an understanding of maybe the culture, they have understanding of how things work. But it seems that if anyone ever is promoted within, they don't get trained as well as someone that came from outside that has to be trained on how that job works. I'm not saying that you shouldn't promote within, because if I ever owned a business, I would definitely promote within because that just makes more sense. But they would still get at training as if they've never worked in that position before, so that way they had a full understanding of exactly what needed to be done in their new position.
How often do you think it's related to promotions that are done within, that it's promoted? Promotions are given to set up failures so they can actually get rid of that person. Does that make sense?
No, that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
You promote them to get rid of them. You give them so much responsibility that you force them to fail.
That's
I've seen-
politics, and I stay out of it as much as possible. So I don't think I've ever seen that before. But like I said, I've always been a grunt worker and never in any other position, and just keep my head down and shut up. So I don't know if it's ever happened before.
I don't, in the different jobs I've had, I've never seen somebody promoted to fail. Have they failed after taking the promotion? Yes, but purposely promoted to fail, I don't think that's usually the intent of an internal promotion.
Jesse, your opinion?
Yeah, I was going to say that I haven't seen anyone particularly promoted to fail, but I have seen them take the spot, and the way the managers treated them, they failed.
Mm-hmm.
And this particular guy, after about 4 months, he stepped down. He's like, I'm not going to do it anymore. And he went from a full-time manager spot to a part-time position just because it was more than he could handle, because they just kept on. And so some ways it almost felt like he was being promoted just so they could fail him. But now, I mean, it's been a couple of, 3 years later, and he's actually doing pretty good now. I mean, he's back in another management spot doing very well. But that first one, that manager that was over him at that time, just it just made you feel like that was what was going on.
I do think there's a major problem when it's promoted within. That you're right, that not enough training is given, and often it results in failure.
Yeah, like I said, a lot of times I've seen where it's assumed because you're doing, like in this case, he was doing the account exec's job, so obviously then, and he was doing a great job, and then promoting him up to the next level kind of made sense, even though he'd only been there short term. But with no training, no experience, and I don't think that Frank had the training and experience to be the mentor to help him make that transition, or even the buy-in to help him make that transition. You were just setting it up for failure.
Yeah.
I don't think Frank didn't have a dire to help him. I think he was totally against Green from the beginning. So I think Frank was looking for reasons to cause him to fail.
Wasn't there to help him, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And it didn't help either that when they were in a meeting and things didn't appear to be correct, that Thomas called him out on the carpet in front of everybody instead of going up and saying, hey, I don't agree with these numbers. Can we talk about them?
Yeah. And so in regards to Frank Davis and his boss, who do you think did the one that does anybody recall who actually hired him?
Yeah, Mary Jacobs did.
And who is she in relation to everybody else?
She was 2 levels above Frank.
So does that put her above Shannon or just below Shannon?
Above Shannon.
She's under Shannon.
Oh, that's right. She was under Shannon. That's right. She was under Shannon.
So Mary Jacobs was another director unequal to Frank Davis. So that leads me to the next question.
Yeah.
Why does somebody hire somebody in a spectrum? Why did she have the ability to hire for not her team? Her direct team. That doesn't make any sense to me.
I can see why in the fact that if Frank Davis is a new manager, he might not know exactly what he's looking for, or because maybe in that structure, managers don't hire their direct people, but the people above them that hire, because they can see everyone in the entire company. Maybe Frank Davis didn't know even about Tom Green because he worked in a different sector and didn't have any influence upon him, so that he doesn't know what's the best candidate.
It's all, okay. If he made, well, obviously he came from a different sector. What is the chances that he came from Mary Jacobs' sector?
Well, Mary Jacobs
Probably.
is the national sales director, so she's over all the national sales.
So,
And remember,
Mary
Tom is
Jacobs.
promoted into his old position.
I'm just trying to figure out if that's why she had so much to do with him being hired or promoted. Huh.
Well, didn't he have a rapport with Shannon McDonald already?
I think he had a
Where
report with
he had
Mary.
met with her, at different functions and actually got somewhat professionally close to her, I guess. That kind of helped the hiring of him.
I thought the case said that he had been meeting with Mary at the corporate office. I'm gonna go pull it back up here.
All it says is senior executives quickly took notice of Green's performance and eager to strengthen his relationship with the company. In 2007, he attended a week-long training at the corporate. Oh, here we go. Shannon McDonald, the division vice president, and Mary Jacobs, the national sales director, made a concerted effort to get to know him better.
So it was through that relationship that he ended up getting hired.
Yeah.
But it also looked, I was going to say, it also looked like through the case there that he didn't keep up his relationship up with him anyway. So, I mean,
No.
what good was that to, get in with him and then not keep up your relationship?
I agree that he didn't maintain that, and they didn't maintain it either. It's kind of like they hired him and then it was hands off.
Right.
I think that.
So,
go ahead.
So I think they're both at fault because they didn't check on him and he didn't maintain that relationship once he got the promotion.
Yeah. Cody?
I think that Tom's point of view, or Thomas's point of view, is that showing the results is the most important thing. You don't have to communicate if you're showing the results. So like when he's trying to build trust or he's trying to sell something, you just have to show the results, but not do anything else. So he's going at it like only one way instead of keeping communications or meeting weekly with his manager or staying in touch. He just thinks that if he can sell, or get his numbers up, that's what's going to go ahead and make him the best person. Well, in this company, it's obviously not that way.
Well, and that's probably what he did as the account exec, which is different than when you become the sales manager, because the sales manager isn't usually out doing the day-to-day sales stuff.
Yeah.
And I think he failed too by not keeping Frank in the loop about what was going on in his travels, because maybe before as the account exec, he didn't have to, and it was like no big deal. But there was no expectation set for communication of travel and
Yeah.
if plans changed and that type of thing. So that just added more fuel to Frank's fire that he wasn't the right person for the job.
Which could go back to Frank being his fault for not training Thomas what his expectations were.
Again, it's where I think they're both at fault. They didn't, there's no communication there.
Yeah.
Well, I think also too that there shouldn't have been any reason that for 45 days later or 40 days later here, Frank and Thomas have a meeting, and Frank gives him all this line of stuff that he's not doing, instead of taking the time as to things happen, say, hey, I need you to start doing this, instead of, at your performance review, this is everything you're doing wrong.
Yeah.
So
I consider Frank the dump and run, right? I'm gonna dump it on you till you messed up, and now I'm gonna go run up the line and say you're not the right person for the job. But we never worked on a performance plan. We never set expectations. We didn't get you any training.
Almost too little, too late.
Yeah.
Okay, shifting over to Shannon McDonald. If you were Shannon, would you have hired Thomas Green, knowing that you have just established a relationship with him? Why would you have hired him? Or why not?
I would not have hired him, because if he's that good at sales, why take him out of it? Because that's why he got hired in the first spot.
Or the other thing is to find out what his ultimate goals are, because maybe it's not, maybe it is that, but it might not have been the right time to promote him.
It would have probably been different if they would have gave him a little more responsibility, a little at a time, to where he gained a little experience. But I don't believe he had enough experience for the position, because all he wanted to do was go and be a salesman anyway, instead of actually fulfilling his responsibilities.
Okay. How about Frank Davis? What does he value? Or what is his end goal? What is he after? What is he trying to accomplish?
He wants numbers. That's what he wants. He's a numbers man, at least from what I would say.
He wants numbers, and he doesn't. It didn't appear he cared how he got there.
No, will these be different numbers than what Thomas is accomplishing by selling?
Well, if he set numbers that Thomas thought were unrealistic after talking to the customers, well, and then his complaint was that Thomas needed to be more creative on how to make those numbers happen.
Okay.
So I agree with Jesse. The bottom line was he wanted the numbers, and he didn't care how he got to the numbers.
And then he's criticizing Thomas because he's not being creative enough, like Tina said, to do it, to make it happen.
How does this feeling of get it done at all costs affect those employees underneath?
Oh, it creates a trust factor, or a lack of trust.
Okay.
I think employees or the individuals underneath start looking at, he doesn't care what I do, just as long as this happens. I think it gives the wrong impression of what the company wants, and it becomes what Davis wants, not what the company wants.
Yeah.
It does. How do the actions of Tom Green differ from the expectations of Frank Davis? So here talking about how what Frank valued, and then what Thomas actually did.
Well, I think Frank is kind of being like a two-face here. He values communications, yet he wants numbers. So he's gonna nitpick Tom because he doesn't like Tom, doesn't want Tom there, has issue with Tom. He's gonna find fault with Tom where he can. But if Tom was to just get let loose and go get as much customers as possible, I don't think Frank would be happy even if he did use the 10% sales quota or the 10% increase, because there's all these other issues that Thomas has going for him.
Well, I'm going to disagree about liking the communication, because the only thing he complained about was not keeping up the calendar and stuff like that. But he never sat down with Thomas to set the expectation for the communication. It was just complain about it after the fact that it didn't happen.
Yeah.
And he never took any time in between that performance review and any situation that ever came up to let him know, hey, I want you to correct this. That would be the right thing to do, instead of waiting for a performance review and then throw it all at him.
Yeah, and even at the performance review, they should have set up a follow-up to, benchmark what needed to be worked on.
Oh, yeah.
And that doesn't appear to have happened either.
I think they both had expectations, but neither one of them took the time to communicate with each other about how to make it work.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you were to point fingers and say who is who has the greatest fault here? Frank, Mary, Thomas, or Shannon?
I think Mary Jacobs and Shannon had the two biggest faults, because they didn't create a cohesive team and work with the ones they made their promotions.
Okay.
I would almost agree with that, but I want to say Frank, because he can set up the expectations and have daily contact with Thomas. That way, he can help Thomas understand what's expected of him, and that way they can work symbiotically. Even if I have someone underneath me in a group or something, or I have a group, and I hate that person, I can still understand what their expectations are, and they can understand what my expectations are, and we can work together, even if we don't. Personal levels don't come together. But Frank did put forth no effort to be actually a manager. He just didn't like Tom, and so he did what he could to see if there's ways to get him in trouble or have bad reviews on him. But I'm going to say Davis, because he didn't put forth the effort as a manager to lead his team or to lead Thomas.
Yeah, I would say that Mary and Shannon had they might have hired him because of what they saw potential in him, but Frank's the one who was there day to day. I think he had the most opportunity to make something happen. He was there. I mean, I think he had the most effect, or could have made the biggest change, but he didn't do anything about it.
Yeah, and part of my concern with Frank was, did he manage people before his promotion?
See, and I don't.
Go ahead.
I was going to say I don't think so. It with the way he's managing, I don't think he ever had been.
And this is what leads me to think that somewhere there was a promotion given to set somebody up to fail because of something not working out years before. Because if Frank was hired, promoted with no expectations given, which means Thomas was done the same way, I don't know. I don't know if he was given what he needed.
Well, I think they both. It's like Cody said before. I think they both lack the whole fact of nobody trained either one of them on what they were supposed to do. I think if there
Yeah.
would have been proper training for each one, then this situation probably would have never happened, and it would have turned out different.
I can see your point of view, Jason. I just think my point of view is that's just looking at politics a lot of the business. But I don't have the experience that you had, so maybe that's you. In real life, you've seen that happen based upon what's happening here. I haven't, so but I just think that they were put into manager positions because they were best in their current job. There was an opportunity that they could fulfill, and then they were just thrown there without proper training. My personal opinion, of course, though.
I agree with you, Cody. I think, yeah, just because and that's why I said we've all seen people get promoted because they're the best at their current position. It doesn't necessarily make them the best person to promote.
Okay, I like that statement.
I would agree with that.
Okay, here now. Does age play any factor into how relationships here? Thomas is 28. His boss Frank is 45. His boss is 42.
It shouldn't, but it does.
So is that
I'd say it does. I would say it does for Frank.
Yeah.
so? Does this play into this office politics deal?
I think in politics, you're gonna find any reason to make something bad, whether it's actually is a factor or not. I mean, my best boss that I've ever had was 25 years older than me, and we hung out after work and did things after work. And he's a good friend of mine still. But in this area, I think that Frank has an issue with Tom, and because he's going to play the politics, he's just going to find whatever excuse, age, gender, work, communication, sales, speaking his opinion, whatever it's going to be, just to find ways to go out and support his opinion.
And I'm not even sure there was a good person for Frank to work with without having that experience. So I don't think it would have mattered really what person you put in there. I'm not sure Frank would have been okay with them.
Especially because that was Frank's job. So he probably thinks he can do that job better, even though it's not his job anymore. And so he's probably being like, well, you're not acting exactly like me. And I obviously knew how to do that job. That's why I was promoted. So he's probably being like, you're not me, so you're not going to do good or do well.
Well, and you're not doing it as good as I did.
To his expectations.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
Go ahead.
Frank had been with that company long enough that I think he knew how the politics worked in that company. And I think that's why he's going about the way he's doing things, because he knows how that politics works in that particular company.
Okay. Next question. Let's for a second. How does power and office politics come into play? You have levels of different power and authority here. How does that play into office politics?
All I can think about right now is my ward. So we just got a new bishopric like a year and a half ago. And I'm not going to say that it didn't go to some of their heads that they were now on the bishopric. And like, it's just crazy. I hate politics so much that I will literally just ignore certain people because I know of the way they act and how they deal with things. And it's just like that. Like some people that get authority and then they think that they are the greatest thing that ever walked this green earth. And then all of a sudden, it's like, well, I'm better than you, or I know how to do that better, or I want to, take you by the hand, or I will go ahead and micromanage you. And it just drives me crazy. So not that was a very constructive answer. I apologize. It wasn't. So
No, I wasn't trying to answer it. I mean, it gives some hints here, and I'm not sure. Talks about content or topic power. It talks about legitimate power. It talks about coercive power. And it talks about referent power, which is basically the linkage between key results and characteristics. So obviously Frank had some legitimate power over Thomas. Shannon had some power over Frank. You said it. You've seen it where it has gone to some of these your leadership head, and yes, I've seen it. Does that go? Does that happen in the political world and into office staff world?
Oh,
Yes.
most definitely.
Absolutely.
How do you respond to that when your boss gets a superior complex?
I ignore him.
So you pull.
I will go this way and take the long way to go to the bathroom or go to the break.
That's a good one. Ignore them. Sometimes that's a little hard to do, but
Definitely so. But I know how you feel.
That's what Thomas tried to do, is ignore him.
Thomas did try ignoring him.
they did ignore each other because they weren't engaged.
And I think that could have been overcome by proper communication from the beginning.
I guess if I had a manager that was in the situation where they had power go to their head, I would do all in my power to have them understand my expectation and for me to understand their expectation and try to fulfill their expectation. Because ultimately, if I want this job, I will have to do what my manager says so that way I don't get fired. As long as legal and stuff like that. And so I think I might hate it, but I would just make sure we understood each other, and I would do the best as I could so that way he was happy in my performance.
So you're saying that as Frank gave out these, what Thomas views as absurd goals, you were sitting there with Thomas, you would go along with it and work your darndest to make them happen.
If I wanted to continue to have that job, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think the other part of it was once you saw it was absurd, you need to go back and talk about, because maybe Frank saw something you didn't, or find out what's driving that number.
Yeah.
But even if Thomas didn't agree with it and voiced his opinion with it, he could still held fast to that and strong to that. But him ignoring his other things like replying back to emails or replying back to phone calls,
It's not acceptable.
Bad. Yeah, that looks bad.
Yeah.
On top of him disagreeing it. If he had just disagreed and done everything else, I know I'm a sales agent. I have not met my numbers like the last year, but I do so much more that my boss still keeps me there because I'm an asset to the team, even if it's not the number wise. So, I mean, Thomas isn't doing anything, in my opinion, from what we've read, to go ahead and appeal as an asset to his boss. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, very much so.
Yeah.
So that brings up the topic of styles, and when they do conflict, what's Shannon's style? Can you?
Shannon's kind of, from what right there toward the end, it said that Shannon was, she didn't. It almost makes you feel like she's already picked a side, because she's asking Thomas to rebuttal what Davis had to say. And she wants a full explanation first before she's even willing to sit down with him.
Okay, how about Frank's? What's his style?
Tattletale first.
Yeah. his way or no way.
I hate those. Okay, how about Matt?
I'm right.
How about
Yeah, I'm right. You're wrong.
How about Thomas's style?
His is an avoidance for conflict
Yeah.
styles.
Yep.
Disassociation, ignoring or discounting the conflict. So he's only recognized the conflict because now he realizes his job could be in potential danger. But the other time he was just ignoring Frank and then disassociating with everything that Frank's doing and just trying to run things himself.
Yeah, and going to another company isn't going to fix that problem.
Okay. So that's a personality avoidance style.
Unless if he did get training from that different company and they trained him to be differently and actually like penetrated his behavior style and actually did change it. So there's a possibility that could change.
Yeah, I even said maybe he needs to have some training like emotional intelligence, or even one that I took called tribal leadership, which was an interesting class because you talked about what brought teams together. So I could even see something like that because, just because, Frank's considered the boss doesn't necessarily mean he's the real boss either. Because Mary Jacobs or Shannon could be the real boss, and Frank's just another worker bee that has a lot of input.
Yeah.
True.
Okay. So we see this relationship, this job headed downhill. I'm going to skip one question. We're going to come back to it. What can be done to salvage? Salvage the job, salvage the relationship, salvage the situation. Without
Thomas can go ahead.
I can say without somebody.
Oh, we lost Jesse.
Oh, we did. Without what's the word? How do we salvage? What do we do to repair the situation?
I think that only Thomas can repair the situation because Frank's not going to do anything. If he doesn't like Thomas, he's not going to go out of his way to repair it. So Thomas is the one that's going to have to do it. And he's basically going to have to come back and commit to Frank that he's going to do everything that Frank wants him to do and that he's going to do it perfectly and that he just has to then go to work doing the thing that Frank wants it done, in my opinion.
Okay. What do you think can be done to salvage, Tina?
I think one of the things they're going to have to do, and it may require Mary or Shannon to sit down and have a meeting with the two of them and set expectations for both people, as well as, air the dirty laundry, get it out, get it, so that they can work together.
Okay. Back to the question I skipped. What should we do now? Without getting negative and saying that everybody's at fault, what do we do?
You have a meeting, and everyone lays out their expectations of everyone else.
Okay. Would it help to understand what they have their own expectations of themselves are?
Yes.
Yeah, I think, if you even go back to the book, The Five Dysfunctions, and doing that first meeting and talking about, some of the basics, because there's no trust in that team.
One way I think you could possibly, what should we do now? meet like you're saying, but instead of immediately tearing somebody down, find out what they think they should be doing, reinforce the positive.
Yeah.
I guess that's
And,
if he really loves sales, obviously he does, because here he goes on, does what a salesman would continue to do.
right?
I'm almost, well, without knowing the rest of the story, I would say he would almost be a better fit as head of sales or a sales.
Yeah. Well, and I think sometimes too, when people are promoted, they don't know the expectations of the new job. And so, in this situation, are they going to hire another account exec to work on the team? Or is Thomas having to take both the account exec and the sales manager's job?
I don't know. I don't think you can take two jobs, though.
I don't think you can either and be effective.
One would suffer.
But, they didn't even talk about, okay, they promoted Frank, then they promoted Thomas, but they didn't say anything about bringing another account exec in to cover what Thomas had been covering.
Yeah.
So that could also create a confusion factor of, well, if I got nobody out in the field doing the sales, then how do we go to the next step too?
Yeah. What can be done to repair the relationship with Davis? What can Thomas do?
I would say apologize and just recommit to him.
Yeah. Apologize and set a path to go forward.
I mean, Frank's going to be hard to work with, but if Thomas wants this job and really wants to repair the situation, he's just going to have to do it. He's going to have to jump no matter how high Davis tells him to jump. He's just going to have to do it.
Okay. In
Yeah.
applying what was given here, how can you brought this? I think I want to call it owning up to expectations, owning up to superiors, is what I would call what you talked about, Cody. Is when a boss says you do. If you want your job bad enough, you do what's asked or what's expected, even if it's beyond a reasonable expectation.
Yep.
Yeah, you have to give it your best shot. I think when you don't give it your best shot, that's when you leave yourself open for more of a chance of not having a job. And if you're not giving it your best shot, how do you argue that it's not feasible?
I don't know. How could you be proactive in understanding and managing and dealing with office politics?
That's always such a fun one. But you have to, be observant. continue to talk to the people that helped you get to where you're going.
Okay. I think being proactive is about the only way to manage it.
Yeah. And like I said, you kind of have to observe too, see who interacts well with each other. I'll never forget one time. Oh, Jason's back, or Jesse's back.
Yeah, I lost my internet.
Oh. I'll never forget one time I had a manager come to me, and this is when I was still a tech, and they said, well, you have to make the teams work together. And I looked at them and I said, well, until you as managers work together as a team, you're not going to find the non-management working together as a team.
No, he won't.
Because if you guys are inner fighting, then the teams aren't going to play well together.
So are we talking about, when we say manage office politics, are we talking about playing the politics, or just understanding where people are at and how they interact with each other?
I think you kind of have to do both.
I don't know. See, I hate office politics, and that's why I guess going back to why I say they were promoted within to be fired, to be failed, I was there. 6 years ago.
You hired someone to fire them? I'm just joking. I know you're joking.
That was me. I was promoted and set up to fail. I went in a company of my current position of being head janitorial of sales in my one branch, to being vice president, well, third in command of a company of 60 branches and roughly about 2,000 employees. It was not given to me my expectations of what I was supposed to be doing. It was not given to me to how to deal with people, how to deal with it. I had no idea what I was even supposed to be doing.
So if that same thing came up to you today, what would you do different?
Well, I think I would have sat back a little bit and observed and asked a lot more questions about what my boss really wanted me to do and how high he really wanted me to jump. And not just, I would have gone back to him and say, what's the bigger picture? What are you really trying to accomplish with me being here? I found out what he wanted me to do at that moment was go solve his $100,000 lost sale out of California. That was easy. I found that hole. But in doing so,
you opened up a bigger political problem?
I did. And I brought it to the surface, thinking I would, to avoid it, not be part of it. And I lost.
Is that because you didn't understand the political inner workings?
I didn't realize how brown different individuals' noses really were.
Yeah, I'm sure that.
I stepped on the wrong person's nose.
Yeah, and that's not a hard thing to do sometimes. That's sometimes a lot easier than one realizes.
So I guess it's my personal opinion that I really, really dislike when a position is solely filled by only those that are within the company, and they won't even accept applications from outside the company.
Yeah, that was even one of the things that, when they were talking about this interview process, it didn't sound like they even looked at external candidates. So, part of it is then, if they had reservations about Thomas, was he really the right person to have for that position?
I don't know. It's interesting is I think I'm darn good at what I do. I bet you I can, I sell $90,000 worth of toilets every month. That's a lot of freaking toilets.
I'm sure it
Yes,
is.
it is.
Now, he's recently offered a managerial position of one of the stores because of a change that they are making. And I could see the writing right on the wall that they were looking to, that I was going to be set up to fail again. And would have offered me 3 times what I'm making now. I would have been making dang near 150,000.
So did you turn down that promotion?
I did. This was like 2 weeks ago.
Ah,
Yeah, I just flat out turned it down. I said no, thank you. And just, I don't know. I'm sure I've just cut my own throat because of turning that down. But I was not going to do something that I didn't feel comfortable doing with.
If you don't feel comfortable with it, they just think it isn't going to work whether you try it or not.
yeah.
So let me read something, and then we're going to go back to how it really applies. Here's the rest of the story. After McDonald's email on February 5th, 2008, Green took the offense against his boss, which you could kind of see that coming with right in.
Right.
Like emails didn't like it being sent to someone else without him. Well, he had to get a third party, which that's pathetic. If you have to get an email third party, from somebody not involved, that's pretty bad politics.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I mean, I guess a pet peeve of mine is if you have a problem with me, don't talk to my coworker.
Come talk to me directly. Well, and Thomas was just as guilty because he was complaining to other people and not going back to Frank or to Mary and Shannon going, I don't agree with this and why I don't agree with it.
Yeah, I think he was. You're right. Okay, it says he took the offense against his boss. He crafted a series of memos, emails, reports, and projections that exposed the inaccuracies and creative forecasting. This data enabled Green to build some alliance with other marketing personnel. So here he built relationships with others. He used this data to ultimately to side with him. On April 4th, so 2 months after that, it was announced that Frank Davis, his boss, was being moved laterally to an undefined special project. However, Green's tactics were seen as over brutal by many in the company, and although he'd won the battle against his boss, his career was irreparably harmed.
Mm-hmm.
McDonald distanced himself from him. By July of 2008, Green announced that he was resigning from his position to pursue full-time studies for an MBA.
Can I say I'm not surprised?
We can only speculate what would have occurred if Green had tried to help Davis work out the discrepancies and problems with forecasting, perhaps both would have succeeded.
If both didn't succeed, one of them would just stayed in their same position, and the other one would have been moved to another position. I don't think either one would have been fired. I think they would have just been moved somewhere else.
If they would have both succeeded?
Well, no. So, say for example that Davis still had an issue with Thomas and tried his best. I think Davis would have still stayed in this position, and Thomas would have been just moved somewhere else, or vice versa. But I don't think they would have both left the company, and I think they would have just gone working on different things.
Could have, but I think the way Green approached it, he burned too many bridges.
I'm gonna say if he didn't burn too many bridges, like he did it a little different.
Yeah. Instead of going on the attack, he should have. He could have gone back to Davis right off the bat, and tried to understand and work things out. But he didn't do that. He just went on the offensive and destroyed whatever relationships there were.
One thing I noticed that I would say is a problem that probably would have helped a lot sooner is somewhere it talks about where Green would go to, I think I want to say it's Shannon's office, McDonald's office, and ask questions.
Yeah, he well, basically once he took the promotion, he quit even talking to her.
So I would have thought the more direct probably would have helped build a relationship, would have been communicating those questions directed to his first superior.
Mm-hmm. And he probably should have he probably should have got to know Frank more, even with after the promotion, was to get to know him.
Yeah, Green should have took more initiative in trying to find out what the expectations and things were in that job, and then then met those, or at least tried to meet them.
Would have. Excuse me.
Bless you.
So how does this pertain to the reading this week? The lessons that go through here with Thomas.
Most of everyone should have their expectations laid out, so that way they all understand where they're coming from and what they want to do.
And as a team, they needed to build trust. Even once they got even before the expectations, they had to build trust, which they didn't have.
I think that trust and understanding what your responsibilities, obligations, if you're not built upon that, I don't think, well, it won't last.
Yeah, you have to know both. You have to have some trust, and you have to have expectations. If you don't have those two things, how do you go forward?
Is it ever too late to clarify expectations?
No.
I don't believe so. I think expectations can be things change, businesses change, everything changes at times, and so to re-verify expectations, I think that's a big issue, because when you have personal performances, a lot of times that's what you're doing, is re-verifying what expectations are, or what new things you need to work on that been brought up before, or or new to the company, or whatever it may be. So I think they change all the time.
And that's okay?
To a point, yes.
Yeah, you have to be able to grow and adjust and change.
You can't let things be stagnant. The same thing repetitive over and over and over. Eventually,
You get burned out.
People are, yeah. Plus, people are your customers are gonna, you ain't gonna sell the same item that you had 50 years ago because you didn't change it. So if you're not willing to change now, whether it's a product or whether it's your actions or whatever it is, then things aren't going to get any better.
Yeah, yeah. So it's never too late to change, never too late to correct relationships, never too late to gain an understanding of just who is responsible and what you're responsible for. How does this apply to is there any gospel connections to the lesson, to the Thomas? Can you think of any?
Yeah, just I mean, like what the question you asked earlier is, you just need to be willing to go ahead and share what your expectations are, their expectations are, and then come together to realize that you're working for one specific thing that's higher than both of you or higher than the three of you. So that way, you know that you're working towards making this aspect better of the gospel, and not just yourself.
Okay.
I would say that the whole point of the gospel is to improve. It's supposed to just be stagnant. We're supposed to constantly be learning and improving. And so if we're not at least trying or trying to do something to make things better, even if it's just trying to fix a relationship, then I think we're failing.
And if you look at the parable of the talents and you try to hide it, the person that hid his talent didn't get added to. In fact, he got his talent taken away from him. So even in this type of situation, if you're not adding to and trying to grow and expand, then things get taken away from you.
They do. They do. Well, thank you for your comments. It's been enlightening.
So after doing this, would you take a different position in that promotion that was offered to you?
No. Well, let me take it. Yes, because I actually went after a different position that I know will open up here in about 6 months. That basically would have paralleled the position I was offered, but on a smaller scale. I would have had the potential to make as much money. But it would have been able to have the ability to clearly define, do it on my terms. And that position still may come. And that's basically what, go ahead.
I was going to say, so are there people that you can work with to build the relationships necessary to make that promotion happen?
The challenge of doing that is I try to keep my nose as clean as can be.
I can tell you from personal experience that doesn't always work.
I'm gathering that. But I'm trying to approach those relationships in a positive manner that doesn't look like I am trying to kill the relationships that I have currently. that I'm not trying to botch them.
Yeah, it's not about killing the ones you currently have. It's about building the ones that, keeping the ones you currently have and building others that can help in that success, should the other position come open.
Yeah. Oh, and I know it will. The position I wanted to go after was a manager for a True Value store.
Mm.
But I didn't want one that was in a different city. I wanted the one that was 5 minutes away from home. One that I started from the ground up. One that I had input on of demographics, geographic areas, of relationships with vendors and whatnot. So it'll happen, I think, if I give it enough time and foster those relationships that can make it happen. So, yeah.
Thing is, I don't believe that you have to be a brown noser like some people to
Yeah.
make things happen, because I think they have a whole lot of common sense. They'll be, I mean, whoever's going to do the hiring knows who's do it and who doesn't, and whether they're just trying to smooth you over or not, so I think it'll all work out.
Yeah, because I think some of us have seen the brown noses where the person's been so far up, if the person opens their mouth, that's when they see daylight.
Yeah.
So
I can see that.
and I guess by me going to school is playing into this office politic game that I have with my current company with them. Generally, the more education you have in my company, the higher you are.
Okay.
And it's pathetic, but my immediate boss and his boss have just as much education as I have or less. Now, he has a few more years of experience, but when you're actually talking educational, he doesn't have it.
So do you think your current boss is feeling threatened with your education?
Oh, he's threatened by me all the way around. He's point blank told me that. Because of what I do, what I sell. He hates the fact that people will come to me to solve their problems. He hates it that people under him will come talk to me that are equal to me, but won't. Yeah. I don't know. I'm not trying to blow my own horn at all, by any means.
Well, it's obvious that at least he recognizes it.
Yeah.
There's something different there than what he's been able to accomplish.
And so
he recognize it too.
He will actually adjust the schedule so in high peak times where more people are going to be into the store, he'll have me give me that day off.
Oh.
Just so I'm not there to meet the clients. And then anytime there's a water heater truck or a truck freight to unload on a large scale that's going to take 6 hours,
you're there.
That's my truck. Just how it works.
So that way you get your extra workout in.
Yeah, I got a chiropractor bill because of it. So. Okay. Well, thanks for. Yeah, thank you. Anything else anybody wants to say?
Well, I would say it might be time you sit down and talk to him and go, how do we work this out?
Well, that was a conversation 3 weeks ago they had with me.
Ah.
What's your problem with me? I laid it out. And I said, do I still have a job now?
So 3 weeks you're still there. That's, I guess, a good sign.
I guess it went back to clearly defining expectations and understanding and how high he says to jump.
Yeah.
So, alrighty, well, I'm going to end this and hopefully that it captures it.